It's time for the Brouhaha Sports Show. Brouhaha Sports with award-winning sports writer Dale McKee and co-host Marshall Wood. Talking sports with the legends of the game and famous sports personalities. Brouhaha! Now to Marshall and Dale with tonight's guest.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Brouhaha. Dale McKee and Marshall Wood together again.
We are.
One more time. At least we're not having to do it long distance anymore.
Yes, that's good because I'm surprised. That bill from Waynesboro to Whistler is probably pretty high.
I'm telling you what, to keep the Brouhaha doors open.
Yes, sir.
You have a big weekend, big week.
Well, I went to Oxford at the weekend.
Yeah.
Watched 7 football games.
Yeah. Were you impressed?
Some I was. Some you just kind of wish you could take a nap.
What impressed you? I know we got some more stuff coming about what's with your guest tonight. We'll get to that in a minute. But what impressed you the most up there during the process? What impressed Dale McKee, creative force behind the Brouhaha? What impressed you the most?
About the state championships.
About your weekend up there at the state championship.
Well, I got to see a little bit of Ole Miss and Memphis play basketball. That was a big upset for Ole Miss.
Is that the most thing that impressed you about the high school championship?
Well, it was the largest crowd in the history of that arena. So, but the basketball team, Ole Miss basketball team suffered the last 3 or 4 years, and they beat a very good Memphis team, and they're 7-0 now.
Man.
So that was impressive. But on the football, on the other side of the street, I saw Louisville is mighty impressive in 4A football.
I hear they had to overcome the referees too.
I don't know. A lot of people, they had 19 fouls in the first half of the Louisville-Columbia game. And Columbia was a pretty good football team.
Oh, yeah.
But really, you don't like to talk about refs, but when you call 19 flags in one half,
that's pretty lots.
The offenses can't ever get any rhythm going.
Yeah.
And so you really couldn't tell. Oak Grove, the quarterback from Oak Grove, Maddox, he didn't get Player of the Year in 7A.
Yeah.
But the quarterback for Starkville was the 7A Player of the Year. But after that game, the MVP went to Maddox.
Yeah.
And I think Maddox, the coach said he had a little chip on his shoulder.
It was his night.
It was his night.
Yes, sir.
And 6A football, I was mighty, mighty impressed with the West Jones Mustangs defense.
Would West have beaten anybody in the state this year? Would they have beaten the 7A champ, you think?
Well, I don't know about that. It's hard to compare them like that, but I'm sure they'd have been in a ball game. They're not that far. I mean, actually, from what I saw this year, West Jones might have the best defense of the teams that Wayne County played.
Yeah. And
that includes Oak Grove.
Did you see a better defense at Oxford this weekend than West?
No.
Okay. They're good. Man, they're crazy good.
Grenada couldn't breathe.
Yeah. I know how they feel.
They were like, get your foot off.
Can we get some help down here? Need a little help down here.
Yes.
Man, what a big good time.
And one of our other local teams, Heidelberg, I thought they never gave up. They were behind and they just kept fighting back and almost had a chance there. Of course, Starkville, they were driving there toward the end of the game and Oak Grove stopped them. And I think that score ended up like 33-27, something like that. So, there were some close games. West Jones had it from the half on. They just dominated, I'm just trying to think of the others, Winona looked pretty good.
Yeah.
What tickled me, the 1A game. Biggersville won their first state championship. And they won it and with 9 seconds to play.
Man, what a game.
They won it 53-49.
Ooh, that's a shootout, buddy.
And in the first half, they scored with 5 seconds to go in the half.
They close out well, don't they? They finish strong, baby.
They do. But those teams played, and it was who stopped the other one was going to win the game. And finally, Biggersville stopped them one time, So so it was a pretty good game.
Yeah.
But listen, our guest is going to talk a little bit more about his thoughts on the game.
Well, who is our guest?
Jared Reading, and he is from Ole Miss 247 Sports. And
so would that make him like the beat writer for 247 over Ole Miss? Basically, is that what we're talking about?
He is one of the writers, but he also, he really was at the game the other night. Basically, there watching as a spectator too, but he was looking at some of the good athletes on the field.
Okay.
And the Winona running back is committed to Louisville. The West Point.
Louisville High School?
Yeah, Louisville.
Okay.
Yeah, Winona he's committed to Louisville University.
The Cardinals.
Yeah, and the running back from West Point is committed to Florida. And the poor Tornadoes really never were in it. They couldn't stop. I think West Point tried 2 passes the whole game, and they ran for like 464 yards, and they couldn't stop them. And time of possession in that game was so out of balance. West Point had the ball for 35 minutes of a 48-minute game. So, anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dale, we're getting along pretty fast here. We got a really good guest, so let's take a break to hear from our sponsors, and then we'll be back with tonight's guest, Jason Reading.
Jared
Reading. Okay, glad we got that straight. We'll be back right after this break. We'll see you in a moment.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954. We are locally owned and pride ourselves on helping our customers find exactly what they need. From foundations to roofs to doors and windows, Phillips has it. For tools, hardware, lumber, and plywood, visit Phillips Building Supply.
Welcome to the show, Jared. Jared, we've already introduced you a little bit, but tell us about your thoughts. We're going to get right into our conversation. What were your thoughts about the state high school championships this week, as far as maybe good teams, good players, or just your overall, who do you think would be the number one team if you ranked them leaving Oxford this weekend out of the ones that were playing up there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I was glad that the state championships moved back to my hometown and less than a mile away from where I currently reside right now. So that was good in of itself. It was good to be back to kind of how my career basically started, was covering high school football. But, it was awesome. It's always awesome when you see a lot of these teams prepare and put all the hard work they put in all year long, and all kind of culminating in one weekend of football where it's almost kind of like a family reunion. But it was really good. It was kind of cool, the fact that, with the exception of South Panola, it was kind of the return of the traditional powerhouses in Mississippi high school football. When you look at a West Point, you look at a Louisville, you look at Charleston, and some of the others that were kind of within the mix as well. Knoxville County being one of them. They didn't win it in there in the end, but a lot of good performance, a lot of good defense that was played too, with the exception of that 1A game, which was really high-scoring bout between Biggersville and Velma Jackson. It was cool seeing Biggersville kind of finally get over the hump and kind of make a statement that they are indeed a good football program as well. And as far as, there's a good defense that was on display, like I mentioned, with Louisville and what we're able to do to Columbia and what West Point was able to do to Laurel. In West Point, you think about defense, think about hard-nosed, gritty football. They showed that. West Point, Louisville winning a 12 state championship, which surpasses South Panola, who basically set the standard for Mississippi high school football. But there's a lot of good things shown. Especially watching the first 7A state championship for the first time, and especially with good quarterback play on both sides, and Starkville having a good chance down the stretch. But something that I always enjoy. People who know me best know that I'm very passionate about Mississippi high school football, and knowing how that's kind of started what I do for my career right now with 24/7 and CBS, and it's wherever it's going to be next year, I'm going to be paying attention, and that this is kind of the fabric of my DNA as somebody who is a passionate sports lover and covers sports.
All right, well, something was going on across. Well, let me ask you one other question. I'll put you on the spot. Who do you think was the best team up there today out of the 14 teams that play?
That's a really good question because Blake Levine and I from WJTV, we had a furious debate about that in the press box up there because I think if you look at the head-to-head stuff and you look at what Louisville did this season, they're a smaller school by scale being in Class 4A. I think, I don't think anyone could argue that they're not the best defense in the state, which I believe certainly they are with what they did to Starkville. I believe what they did to West Point. One was the runner-up, one was the state champion, both in the same area. I think it's hard to argue with that, but at the same time, you have to always wonder how it would be this time around because there's different teams now from where they were back in August and September when teams are really starting to kind of figure out themselves and have an identity. Other factors go into it. I think Louisville's up there. I think with what West Point did, I think they were one of those teams that night that you could play them 100 times out of 100 times that they would still win every single time. But let me tell you, I was very impressed with what Wes Jones was able to do to Grenada. I watched Grenada the week before, just had a lot of success offensively, be very balanced. Michael Farrer always has a really good balanced attack where he's been, especially in year one. But defensive line of the week definitely has to go to Wes Jones. But as far as overall defense, Louisville has been nasty all year long. So as far as the best team, I think that's up for debate depending on who you ask. But, the numbers don't lie and the head-to-head wins don't lie. So I think you have to go with Louisville.
Who was the best player that you saw up there?
That's a good question, too.
You got to watch Odell.
I think there has to be, that's a tough one. What did you say?
I said you got to watch Odell. He'll throw you a curve every once in a while.
Yeah. I think, I'm blanking on his name right now, and I've watched this guy play multiple times this year. Quarterback from Winona was phenomenal, but he and Kanan Daniels from West Point, just what they were able to do to kind of take control of the game and kind of lead things offensively is good enough.
Yeah.
But as far as just impacting the team game, I would have to probably say those two guys.
Yeah, Caden had a great game. He's committed to Florida. He's the running back from West Point. You have to refresh my memory on the guy from Winona as far as his name goes. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but he was like 22 for 25 passing, which is phenomenal.
Richardson or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was Richardson, but he was 22 for 25, and he had a great. I thought DU with a Maddox guy from Oak Grove. I thought he really shined in his moment.
Absolutely,
he's the Texas A&M commit right now. Okay, now just briefly touch on it for just a couple minutes. What'd you think about, a lot of people may not keep up with basketball like they do college football. What'd you think about the significance of Ole Miss's basketball win over Memphis Saturday?
I think it's as significant as you could possibly get, especially when you're in the early stages of building a program like Chris Beard is. Of course, everyone kind of knows that men's basketball, whether they have been competitive or not at all, there's kind of been that small sense of, I guess, I don't want to say apathy, except for the last 2 years because there was a lot of apathy in there, but just for the longest time, men's basketball at Ole Miss is kind of seen as just kind of bridging the gap between football and baseball season because that's kind of what Mississippi is known for, and it's kind of their passionate thing. But, Chris Beard has really come to Ole Miss to really kind of bring a mentality of why not Ole Miss, why not us? And I think that, and I think when you see the success that he's had at Texas Tech and Texas, really anywhere he's been, it kind of makes any program that he's a part of kind of have that same mentality. And in order to do that, you have to have a home court advantage. And truth be told, Dale, I think that was, the biggest home court advantage I think I've ever seen Ole Miss have in the last 4 years of being involved with this program. And they were very much a factor against Memphis. You know, a very extremely athletic team, very well coached team between Penny Hardaway, Rick Stansberry helping them out too. And the way that Ole Miss won it in the end, I feel like previous Ole Miss teams would have crumbled in those moments, but not this Ole Miss team. And I believe this team is different, and I think it's going to pay dividends down the road when it comes to building a resume and whatnot.
I totally agree with you. I think it was a good win for them, and that'll give them some motivation for the rest, especially the non-district schedule. Our non-conference schedule, I guess, in colleges now. Okay, now next question is Ole Miss Bowl. Did they get rewarded by going to the Peach Bowl over the Citrus Bowl?
I think, this is what Ole Miss wanted the whole time, as far as just going to a New Year's Six Bowl in general. I think if you looked at the last couple of weeks of the season, there was kind of a logjam at the top of the SEC and kind of a logjam above them, and trying to figure out if Ole Miss could kind of break into that mold, because Ole Miss has 10 regular season wins. That's the second time in school history in the regular season, but also the second time in the last 3 years, both coming underneath Lane Kiffin. So it just kind of seemed like it just didn't seem right that Ole Miss was going to be able to possibly win 11 games the first time ever and not have that happen in a New Year's Six Bowl. And I think there was kind of some promise down the stretch, but I feel like the largest time it was kind of a general consensus that they might fall outside that criteria or kind of that plateau of bowls. But I was pleasantly surprised personally, because I felt like if there was any chance of Ole Miss going to a New Year's Six Bowl, it would be the Cotton Bowl against Texas, because, we've been told by people in the Cotton Bowl committee that they were very much interested in an Ole Miss-Texas Cotton Bowl. Now, granted, Texas went on to win their conference and went on to be in a position to go to the college football playoff, which is awesome for them, but it kind of seemed like Ole Miss didn't really have much of a prayer to get into one of those. So I was pleasantly surprised when the Peach Bowl was there to kind of swoop in and get a really good matchup if you look at it with Penn State. Penn State's got phenomenal defense. The number one scoring defense, or the number one defense in the country when it comes to yards given up. So I think it's kind of the perfect matchup, especially when you look at Ole Miss offensively and what they've been able to do underneath Lane Kiffin, not just this year, but in years past. So it's going to be really exciting, especially being in Atlanta. Ole Miss is going to take over the place with it being 5.5 hours away. So it's going to Penn State's going to run into a buzzsaw when it comes to that, but you obviously have to play the games first.
Now, when you talk about the New Year's Six, explain that to our listeners as far as what bowls make up the New Year's Six. Because it's not all bowls even played on January the 1st. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're all kind of around that New Year's Day, New Year's Eve type area. And those are the bowls that, basically for those who, at least in this era of college football that we're in with the college football playoff, it's one of those that you missed the New Year's Six, you missed the college football playoff, no problem. These are the big time bowls that you've heard about for the last 100 years. The Cotton Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, the Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, the big time bowls that when teams won these back in years past, it was a big deal. And sometimes those determine the national championship. And the New Year's Six rotates, and having two of those bowls represent, the teams that are going to be playing for a national championship. And this year it's the Rose Bowl. The top four teams being, Alabama, Texas, Washington, and Michigan. So that's where that goes, and the rest of them are kind of for the next 8 teams that fall below that.
All right, well, let's get into the controversy, okay? So they picked Michigan 1, Washington 2, 3 they went with Texas, and 4 they met with Alabama, and they kind of excluded probably the number 1 team all year in Georgia and Florida State. In your opinion, did they take the best 4 teams?
That's a really tough one, because I've kind of gone back and forth on this myself over the past 24 hours plus. And to this point of saying this, I don't know if I've really come with a very conclusive answer. Because I think if you look at it from the committee standpoint, somebody was going to have to be left out, and I hate to say it, but it was kind of a lose-lose situation either way when you looked at those teams that are kind of within that top 6 area, and it does kind of on the surface seem a little bit criminal that a 13-0 Florida State team who won and went undefeated in a Power 5 conference like the ACC doesn't get represented at all just because their strength of schedule was not as much as the others, and having your starting quarterback hurt for the last 3 games despite still winning those games. So I could definitely see a lot of anger and frustration from Florida State. I mean, the head coach, the athletic director, I think the ACC commissioner, even a United States politician got involved in really expressing their anger about that. And I think, it's justified. But at the same time, it's kind of which way you look at it. You look at that, or you look at what Alabama was able to do with their only loss being to a team like Texas that's in the college football playoff and hasn't lost since. And they won the best conference in college football, the SEC. And I don't think there's any argument about that. I think it was fair that Texas was above Alabama because Texas beat Alabama early on, and if you're going to go by head-to-head, that was the way to do it. But as far as the debate and the controversy with Alabama and Florida State, it was going to be tough no matter who's going to be in, who's going to be left out. So,
well,
I don't really have a defined stance one way or the other, but I can kind of see frustration or, a case to be made for both sides. I really do.
Well, the thing about all 5 of the teams that we're talking about, the top 4 in Florida State, they all have one thing in common. They won their conference championships, and Georgia didn't. And I have nothing against Florida State or Georgia, but I was also under the opinion, how can you actually leave out the SEC champion into a 14 playoff?
Absolutely.
Now, it's been done before because if you remember back in the day, Auburn went undefeated, had to go to the Sugar Bowl because USC or Oklahoma or somebody was picked ahead of them to play in, at that time, a 2-team national champion. And Auburn was undefeated, and they went to Sugar Bowl and won, so they ended up the season undefeated, and they still claim that as a national championship also over there in Auburn.
Yeah,
so it's been done before to an SEC team.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of, this is not, the same level as what you said with Auburn back in, I think, 1993, if I'm not mistaken. One of the things that kind of sparked the conversation of does a 12-team playoff need to happen, was UCF 6 years ago, 2017. They went undefeated, but granted, it was, in a group of 5 conference. And everyone kind of laughed at them when they considered themselves national champions. And to this day, I think the NCAA still recognizes UCF as a partial national champion, which all of us laugh at because they didn't get anywhere close to the playoff. So, I think everything around it kind of gives a lot more credence to an expanded playoff, which we're going to get next year. And, I think it's good for business, and it might be good for the game. Who knows? Maybe not so much for player safety, but, it definitely kind of puts perspective of, okay, are these guys the guys that you need to have to play for a national championship? So, it's all a matter of perspective with any topic around it, one way or another. But I think you brought up a good point with Auburn, and that was actually brought up yesterday with a lot of Auburn fans, saying like, "Don't worry, Florida State, this isn't the first time."
What about recruiting now for? I know Ole Miss is, and I'm just talking about Ole Miss in particular for our Rebel fans listening. What about recruiting as far as the philosophy this year? I know the transfer portal is used for need, and I know they're going to use it. They may not have used it as much as they have in the past, but he seems to be getting a lot of commitments from high school kids, especially in Mississippi. What's your take on Ole Miss recruiting as far as football?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The transfer portal has, opened the door for a new level of roster building, and it kind of gives some flexibility of how you build your roster. It's kind of, twofold. Do you want the players that have a tremendous amount of upside that you can grow and that you can develop into a leader and be a more of a foundational guy who could even also maybe play in the NFL in a couple of years? Or do you want the guys who are, have done the same thing but are a lot more proven at the college level and who have played college football before and use that as use the kind of NFL free agency model to type of do it? And I think it's no secret that, that Lane Kiffin and his staff has really doubled down on transfer portal, because the first year that it was kind of a thing, or the first year that it's been a lot more loose with, with NIL, with, name, image, likeness being introduced, that, Ole Miss can get really talented players that have played college football before and fill immediate needs, especially when, the recruits haven't been there or, they're not ready yet. But I think Ole Miss is starting to they're starting to evolve in kind of both aspects of it. And I think that's the reason why people are a lot more optimistic about Ole Miss's immediate and, foreseeable future of the program, because like you just said, they have, put a little bit heavier emphasis this year on their high school recruiting class than they have in years past, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And a lot of that has to do with Pete Golden coming in with his Mississippi ties, played football at Delta State, coached at Southern Miss. His wife is, went to Ole Miss. He's done a phenomenal job so far of getting the commitments and, possibly securing the deal on a phenomenal in-state, signing class, particularly on defense, with, Kamarian Franklin currently committed, and, William Eccles and Jeffrey Rush and the others that are committed right now. It sets a really good precedent that they are kind of coming around to, and they know that they need that because, I think last year Ole Miss kind of experimented with the transfer portal, but they realized that there needs to be a little bit more of a foundation than just kind of a plug-and-play type system. But on top of that, they've kind of learned from last year that, if you're going to bring in transfer players, no matter how talented they are, they need to have that it factor about them, and they need to have those leadership qualities and that maturity, to thrive and to put their egos aside and put their stats aside for the better part of the team, to have a lot more of a cohesive culture along with it. And I think this year's transfer portal haul is living proof of that. And I think and that's exactly who they went after. And I think it's paying wonders for this current season and possibly for future Ole Miss teams that they've kind of learned their lesson in that regard.
Jerry, this is Marshall. I'm going to interrupt you. I kind of gave you a hint on this a little earlier. I'm kind of the time keeper, so we appreciate you and what you've brought to our table tonight. It's been very informative. Thank you for taking time to be with us. I'm going to ask you to hold on for just a minute. We're going to sign off to a break, but just hang on with us for just a minute. But right now, we're going to take a break to hear from one of our sponsors, and Dale and I will be back with tonight's final segment of the Brouhaha right after this break.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954. We are locally owned and pride ourselves on helping our customers find exactly what they need. From foundations to roofs to doors and windows, Phillips has it. For tools, hardware, lumber, and plywood, visit Phillips Building Supply.
Welcome back, everybody. I tell you what, old Jared, he's all about them Rebels, ain't he?
He is.
That's his job, though. He's supposed to be, ain't he?
Well, he grew up in Oxford. That's the problem, isn't it?
Man, what a blessing. I mean, to be like he said, grow up there and to be able to work there. Mm-hmm. And he's a knowledgeable guy. We appreciate you lining him up, Dale. You always come up with some good ones. We appreciate that. Dale, you asked him about the playoff, and I just kind of want to be quiet on that as long as I could. Do you think they got it right?
Well, I mean, if you're just going to pick four, I don't...
No, but I don't.
No.
What's the goal? What are they supposed to do?
Well, they're supposed to pick the four teams that are playing the best right now.
The four best.
The four best right now.
Yeah. I think... Well, I made my pick Saturday night. I picked. And what I picked and I'm not saying this is right. I picked this. I'm back up. I picked Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. I knew I picked Alabama to beat Georgia. And I knew if they beat Georgia, they were going to be in, and they had to have Texas with them. If Alabama doesn't win that game against Georgia, Texas ain't in. That's my opinion. But anyway, I would change mine. I would go Michigan, Washington, Alabama, and Georgia. Those are the 4 best teams in football, in my opinion. And we're going to find out. We're
going to find out about Florida State when they play in the Orange Bowl. Who are they playing in the Orange Bowl?
Well, I got it written down here somewhere. Let's see, they play in Georgia. But, it don't matter. Georgia ain't going to show up for that game. You know that, right? Part of their players won't even play in that game. You aware of that, right? So that ain't going to be a match. It ain't going to be the Georgia team that played Alabama. We've seen it happen before. Sure. A lot of these teams that are playing for national championship, if they ain't in the national championship, they don't show up in these bowl games. So,
well, the NIL might have changed that.
Well, it might have, but I'm just going to say you're not going to get a good read on Georgia, Florida State when they play. Of course, without that quarterback, I mean, that was me. I couldn't put Florida State in because the quarterback's out. They look terrible to me.
Well, I don't know what the requirements are as far as, is the SEC champion automatically in the playoffs?
Nobody's automatically in.
No, but what I'm saying from the SEC standpoint.
Well, from the SEC.
I mean, in basketball, you got to be the SEC tournament champion.
Different rules.
Not regular season. No, I understand that. But if you look at the 5 teams, if you look at Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama, and Florida State, they all won their conference. Georgia didn't win.
Texas did.
Yes, they did.
Did they? Oh, that's right, they did.
They won Big 12.
That's right, they did.
The only one didn't win it was Georgia. Mm-hmm. So you can say, I'm sorry, Georgia, you didn't win your conference championship. And that holds a lot of weight with us. Mm-hmm. And Florida State, we can find stuff wrong with Florida State, okay? We can say, okay, 7 teams had losing records they played. Right. 3 of them had less than 3 wins. I'm just going by what you could use against them.
Yeah.
But then you get to Alabama and you say, well, you lost at home, but you barely survived Auburn. It took a miracle for you.
They've been doing that for years.
Yeah.
That's the way they roll, baby.
Yeah.
Roll Tide.
Yeah. Well, Bear Bryant, he used to have miracles.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, he walked on water.
Oh, sure he did.
Yeah.
I tell you what, the one they got down there is walking a little on water himself. Oh, Nick, boy. But anyway, I just want you to know, Florida State, they don't belong. They don't belong. But anyway, that having been said,
Does anybody in Florida listen to this? I'll give you his phone number.
Call me. They don't belong. They don't belong. But anyway, and it's sad because if they had the quarterback, I would have said they belong. But without it, they don't. Anyway, Dale, we appreciate you. We appreciate tonight's guest. We want to remind everybody that you can listen to us or keep up with us on Facebook at the Brouhaha and on all of our shows or give me some sign language here. I can't read that. But all of our shows are on. Where are they on, Dale? YouTube?
They are.
That's right. And they're on the Brouhaha. You can find us there. Yeah. And all that having been said, it always comes down to this. You know what time it is? It's time to say goodbye, Dale.
Goodbye, Dale.
And Dale and I will see you next week for more of the Brouhaha. Get us out of here, Jamie.
You've been listening to the Brouhaha with Dale McKee and Marshall Wood. Heard Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. on WABO. For more of the Brouhaha, follow us during the week on Facebook and WABO.